My mother laughed, not a small, awkward laugh that she tried to hide. A real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep in the chest, the kind that says she truly believed what she was saying was obvious and true. She looked at my sister across the dinner table, then she looked at me and she said the words I had been quietly dreading for years. She said my sister had earned everything she had, that everything good in our family came from her hard work, her sacrifice, her talent. And then she looked at me the way you look at someone you have already decided is less than. I sat in that chair and I felt something inside me go completely still. Not broken, not crying, still. Because I knew something she did not know I knew. I had the receipts, the records, the real numbers, and the real story. And the moment was finally here. Before this story goes any further, I want to ask you something real. Have you ever worked so hard for so long that your silence started to look like agreement? Have you ever let someone take credit because the fight to correct them felt too exhausting, too risky, too family breaking to start? If you have ever been in that place, stay right here, because this story is for you. And if you want to see what happens when the quiet person finally speaks, keep watching because what came next changed everything. My name is Nadia. I am 31 years old. I work in financial operations, which is a fancy way of saying that I am very good at tracking numbers, understanding where money goes, and spotting the moments when the story people tell does not match the reality on paper. I have always been like this. Even as a child, I noticed things. I noticed which version of the story changed depending on who was in the room. I noticed who got praised and who got passed over. I noticed patterns. That ability to notice things clearly, without flinching, without needing the picture to look different than it actually was, that skill became the most important thing I ever developed. And it was exactly what my family underestimated for 25 years. I grew up in a mid-sized house in a mid-sized city with a mother named Rosalie, a father named Dennis, and one older sister named Celeste. Celeste is 4 years older than me. From the very beginning, she was the one the room turned toward. She was louder. She had a quicker smile. She knew how to fill silence in a way that made adults feel comfortable, and she learned early that performance was a currency in our house. My mother, Rosalie, was a woman who cared enormously about how the family appeared to the outside world. She cared about the impression. She cared about who said what at church, what the neighbors noticed, what the relatives commented on during holiday visits. And Celeste gave her something to show off. Celeste was the production, I was the background. My father, Dennis, was quieter. He worked long hours at a distribution company and came home tired most nights. He was not a man who fought hard battles inside the house. He let things settle the way gravity settles things. Whatever was already leaning a certain way kept leaning. He was kind to me, he was not unkind to me, but he also did not push back when Rosalie's preference for Celeste became something visible and fixed. He let it be what it was. I think he told himself that was keeping the peace. I learned much later that keeping a bad peace is just a slower way of choosing a side. Celeste went to a state university on a partial scholarship and a large chunk of money my parents had been saving for years. I was told when my time came that the fund had been used, that there was not enough left for a full contribution, that I was smart and I would figure it out. I was 17 when my mother told me that. She said it while folding laundry, not looking at me, her voice very matter of fact, as if she was telling me the store was out of my preferred cereal and I would just have to choose something else. I stood in the doorway of the laundry room for a moment and then I nodded and I left and I went to my room and I sat on the floor with my back against the bed for a long time. I did not cry. I started calculating. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I applied for grants. I worked part-time at a copy center while finishing high school. I graduated with enough support to attend a 2-year accounting program, worked full-time to save money, transferred to a 4-year university, and finished my degree at 23 with honors and $0 of family money. While I was doing all of that, Celeste finished her degree in communications, spent a year traveling with money she borrowed from my parents that was never paid back, and then came home and announced she was going to start a business. The business was a small event planning company. Rosalie was thrilled. The entire family was mobilized. My father let Celeste use the garage as storage for event supplies. My mother started talking about the business to every person she knew. A family group chat was created and my mother posted in it constantly, sharing every event Celeste booked, every client she signed, every small milestone. It was called Celeste Events and the logo was something Celeste had designed herself on a free app. My mother had it printed on a coffee mug. Here is what the group chat never mentioned. Celeste was not good with money. She was not good with spreadsheets, contracts, invoices, or follow-up billing. She had vision and she had personality and she knew how to make a room feel special, but the back-end operations of running a business were genuinely beyond her comfort zone. And so she came to me. At first it was small things. Can you look at this contract, Nadia, and tell me if anything looks wrong? Can you help me build a simple invoice template? Can you check these numbers because they are not adding up and my client is asking questions? I said yes every time. I said yes because I was her sister. I said yes because I still believed at 24 that doing things for the people you love is how love works. I said yes because some part of me still wanted my mother to look across the room and see me contributing to something she cared about. even if she never connected my contribution to the outcome. The requests grew. Within 1 year, I was doing Celeste's full bookkeeping, reconciling her accounts, managing her invoicing system, tracking client payments, sending overdue notices, building out her pricing structure, and preparing her quarterly tax summaries for her accountant. I was doing all of this in addition to my own full-time job. I did it at night, on weekends, early on Sunday mornings before the rest of the world was awake. I tracked every hour I spent on it, not to charge her, but because I am the kind of person who tracks things. It is just how I operate. What did I receive for this? Occasionally a thank you, sometimes a meal when I came to help at the office, which was by this point a real rented office space paid for partly by another loan from my parents, sometimes a mention on a group call, but mostly what I received was invisibility. The business grew steadily. Celeste signed bigger clients. She hired a part-time assistant. She bought a second-hand van for event transport. My mother talked about Celeste's success at every family gathering like it was a wonder of the world, like watching something grow from a seed she'd planted. And in the group chat, every win was Celeste's win. Every failure was a temporary setback that the family would rally around, and my name was not in any of it. There was one afternoon, maybe 2 years into this arrangement, when I was at Celeste's office sorting through a backlog of unpaid invoices that had piled up while Celeste was managing a large event. My mother stopped by unexpectedly. She walked in and she saw me sitting at the desk, surrounded by files and a laptop, and she looked around the office and she said, "Isn't this place coming along beautifully? Celeste has worked so hard for this." She did not ask what I was doing. She did not ask if I needed anything. She picked up a printed flyer from the counter, smiled at the logo, and left. I watched her walk out the door and I kept my face very calm, and then I turned back to the invoices. I had 43 of them to sort. By the time I was 27, I had been supporting Celeste's business operations for 3 full years. In that time, I had built their entire accounting system from scratch, created client management templates, caught 2 significant billing errors that would have cost Celeste more than $8,000 in losses, and essentially kept the financial side of the business functional and clean. Celeste's accountant, a man named Gerald, had once told Celeste during a review meeting that her books were the cleanest he had seen for a small business at this stage. Celeste thanked him graciously. She did not mention my name. I was sitting 2 feet away. I kept telling myself it was fine. I kept telling myself she knew what I did even if she did not say it. I kept telling myself that family is family and this is what you do. I kept telling myself that someday it would be recognized, that the story would be corrected, that my mother would realize at some point that there was more happening than she was seeing. I told myself all of these things the way you hold a door closed that you already know has a broken lock. Then something shifted. It was not a dramatic shift. It was quiet and slow, the way a tide pulls back from a shore. Celeste hired someone. His name was Marcus, and he was a business consultant, young, confident, enthusiastic, and completely dazzled by Celeste's personality. Marcus spent 2 weeks analyzing the business at Celeste's invitation and then presented her with a full growth strategy. He gave her a report, he made a slide deck, he talked about systems and scale, and he charged $4,000 for the work. Now, Marcus was not wrong. His recommendations were solid. But as I sat in the presentation Celeste had invited me to, I looked at his slide deck and I recognized, section by section, almost everything he was describing, because I had already built most of it. The invoicing system he said the business desperately needed, I had built it 2 years ago. The client payment tracking he said was missing, I had created and was actively maintaining it. The contract template he said the business should implement immediately, I had designed it from scratch 18 months earlier. He had reviewed the business and he had seen the systems I built, and he had packaged his recommendations partly around their existence without knowing who had built them, and he charged $4,000. And Celeste wrote him a check. And she posted about his visit in the family group chat like it was a breakthrough. I said nothing. I sat with that information for 2 weeks. I kept doing the work I had always done. I told myself there would be a right time to have the conversation. Then I went home one Friday night after a 12-hour day at my actual job, opened my email, and found a message from Celeste. It was friendly in tone. She wanted to discuss expanding the business, and she wanted to talk about whether I could take on a few more responsibilities, specifically managing vendor relationships, because Marcus had recommended it in his report. She used the words "it would mean so much to me." I read that email 3 times. I thought about the $4,000 paid to Marcus. I thought about the 3 years I had been working for nothing. I thought about Gerald, the accountant, saying the books were the cleanest he had seen. I thought about my mother in that office, picking up the flyer and leaving without asking what I was doing. And I wrote back and I said I was happy to discuss it in person, but that I thought it was also time we talked about what my involvement had actually looked like and what moving forward should look like. I suggested a Saturday afternoon meeting. Celeste agreed immediately. The meeting did not go well, not in the way I had expected it to go badly, and not in the way I had hoped it might go well. It went sideways in a direction I had not fully prepared for. When I sat down with Celeste and laid out calmly and clearly the work I had been doing, the hours I had tracked, the systems I had built, the invoices I had recovered, and the overall financial contribution my support had made to the business, Celeste listened with a strange expression. Not guilty. Not defensive, almost confused, as if I was describing something she had genuinely not organized in her mind that way. She said things like, "I thought you were just helping, and I did not realize you kept a record of it." And then quietly, almost carefully, she said, "I just assumed you were doing it because you wanted to." I looked at her for a moment and I said, "Celeste, I did it because you needed it, and because I am your sister, not because it was nothing." She nodded slowly. Then she said she would need time to think about it. I said that was fine. I said I would appreciate a response in the next 2 weeks because I needed to understand whether to continue the arrangement or step back. She nodded again, and I went home. 2 weeks passed, no response. I sent a gentle follow-up, a brief email saying I had not heard back and I wanted to check in. Celeste replied 3 days later with a very short message saying she had been busy with a large event and she would call soon. She did not call. A month passed. I kept doing the work because the system would have fallen apart without maintenance, and some part of me still could not let that happen to something I had helped build. Then came the dinner. It was a family dinner at my parents' house, a Sunday evening in late autumn when the air outside was cold and the house smelled like my mother's roast, and the table was set with the good plates she only used when she wanted the occasion to feel formal. My aunt was visiting, my mother's sister, a woman named Patricia who had always been warm to me but who had also always orbited my mother's opinions closely. There was my father, Dennis, quiet as usual, glad to have everyone together. Celeste was there, bright and full of stories, talking about a corporate event she had just completed, a big one, the biggest contract the business had landed to date. My mother was glowing. She talked about how proud she was. She talked about how Celeste had built something real from nothing. She looked at Patricia and she said, "I always knew Celeste had something special. She earned everything she has by her own hard work and her own talent." She said it with the confidence of someone presenting a fact that everyone in the room already agreed with. And then, almost as an afterthought, she glanced at me and she laughed, not a cruel laugh, not intenio. Nally cutting, just a light, dismissive laugh, the kind that comes when someone has already decided the contrast is funny. And she said, "Nadia is still figuring her own life out. You know how it is, not everyone finds their thing at the same pace." Everyone at the table shifted slightly. Patricia looked at her food. My father's jaw moved, but no words came out. Celeste did not correct her. I looked at my mother for a moment and she met my eyes and she was still half smiling as if what she had said was perfectly reasonable. And I felt that stillness again, the same stillness from 25 years ago when she told me the college fund was gone, complete inner quiet, and I knew exactly what I was going to do. I did not react at the table. I let the evening continue. I was pleasant. I ate my food. I helped clear plates. I said goodbye to my aunt warmly. I kissed my parents goodnight. I drove home in the dark and I sat at my desk and I opened a folder I had been maintaining for 3 years without knowing exactly when I would need it. It was a folder with a name that I had never changed. I had simply called it documentation. Inside that folder were 3 years of records, every invoice I had built, every account reconciliation I had performed, every email in which Celeste had asked me for help and I had responded, the original spreadsheet I had created for her client billing system with my authorship metadata still attached because I had never thought to remove it, screenshots of the accounting software I had set up using my own email as the administrator. A log, date by date, of the hours I had spent working on the business. Communications with Gerald the accountant in which he had copied me on tax summary reviews. And something I had not even thought about until recently, the original contracts I had drafted for two of Celeste's largest clients, contracts that had my name in the document properties because I had created them from my own laptop. I also had something else. 2 months earlier, a woman named Diane had contacted me. Diane ran a small business consulting firm that specialized in helping female entrepreneurs scale their operations. She had been referred to me by Gerald the accountant, who had apparently told her that the operational backbone of Celeste Events was run by someone with exceptional systems and financial management skills. Diane had assumed that person was Celeste. When she reached out and I explained my role, she was quiet for a moment. Then she asked if I had ever considered doing this kind of work professionally, building financial and operational infrastructure for small businesses. She said she had 3 clients actively looking for exactly that kind of support, and she would pay well for someone with my documentation skills and track record. I had been sitting with that conversation for 2 months. I had not acted on it because I had still been trying to fix things quietly within the family. But after that dinner, after my mother laughed at me in front of my aunt and called me someone who was still figuring it out, I opened Diane's email thread and I wrote back. I said I was ready to talk. We scheduled a call for that Tuesday. The call with Diane lasted an hour and 40 minutes. By the end of it, I had a clear picture of what she was offering. She had 3 clients who needed operational and financial support. One was a food product company with 8 employees and a billing system in chaos. One was a boutique clothing brand that was growing fast and losing money in gaps they could not identify. One was a real estate staging company that had no contract templates. no invoicing system, and an owner who was brilliant at her actual craft and completely overwhelmed by the business side. Deanne said she would bring me in as an independent contractor, set my rate, give me full autonomy over how I worked, and refer additional clients as they came through her network. The rate she mentioned was more per month than I had ever made in any single month of my life up to that point. I said yes. We agreed on a start date 3 weeks out. I hung up the phone and I sat very quietly for a moment and I thought, so this is what happens when someone actually sees the work. Now I had to deal with Celeste's business. Because if I was taking on 3 new clients through Diane, I did not have the time or energy to keep quietly maintaining a system for free while being described as the family member who was still figuring things out. I needed to either formalize the arrangement or exit it cleanly. I decided to try one more time. I wrote Celeste a long, detailed, measured email. I outlined everything I had contributed, specifically and with dates. I explained that I had a new professional opportunity that was going to require most of my available time. I said I was prepared to do one of 3 things. I could continue my current role for a fair monthly consulting fee that I named specifically. I could step back entirely over a 4-week transition period, during which I would document everything I had built and hand it over properly. Or if she wanted a formal partnership structure, I was open to discussing it. I gave her 2 weeks to choose. I also very carefully sent that email to myself through a secondary email address. I did not mention this to anyone. I just wanted a clean timestamp that I controlled. Celeste read the email. I could see the read receipt. She did not reply for 4 days. On the 5th day, she called me. The call started reasonably. She said she appreciated the email. She said she had been thinking. Then she said that she felt the email was a little bit aggressive, that she had never meant to make me feel undervalued, that family does not charge family for help, and that she was surprised I was making this feel transactional. She used that word, transactional. And then she said something I had not expected. She said she had talked to our mother about it. I asked her what she had told our mother. She said she had explained that I was asking to be paid for things I had always done voluntarily and that I was threatening to walk away from the business right before a major season. I asked Celeste what her response was to my request. She said she needed more time. I told her she had already had 3 weeks since our in-person meeting and now had had 4 more days since the email. She said that was not fair. I said, Celeste, what is the answer? She said she could not afford to pay me right now. I said, okay, thank you for being clear, and I ended the call. I sent one final short email that evening. I said I understood and I appreciated her honesty. I said I would honor a 2-week transition period and prepare full documentation of every system I had built. I said after that my involvement would end. I kept my tone completely neutral. I saved that email too. The transition period was its own kind of storm. On day 3, my mother called me. The call opened with her saying she hoped I was going to be reasonable about this. I asked what she meant by reasonable. She said Celeste had worked so hard to build that business and that I was going to damage it right at a critical time by pulling back. I said I had offered 3 options and Celeste had declined all of them. My mother said that family does not put a price on helping each other. I said I had never put a price on it for 3 years, but things were different now. She asked why things were different. I said because I had a clear professional opportunity that required my time and because continuing to work for free was no longer something I was able to do. She said, Nadia, your sister needs you. I said, Mom, I know. That is why I built her a fully documented handover package. The silence on the phone lasted about 5 seconds. Then my mother said, you always have to make everything complicated, and she ended the call. I finished the transition package over the following 2 weeks. It was 47 pages. It covered every system I had built, how to use it, how to maintain it, who to call if there were questions, and what to watch for in the quarterly reviews. I sent it to Celeste by email and I sent a printed copy by courier. I kept a copy for myself. Then I started my new work with Diane's clients and I said nothing to my family about it. 3 months passed. The work with Diane was extraordinary. The food product company's billing chaos was sorted within 6 weeks. The clothing brand's money gaps turned out to be 3 specific vendor contracts with hidden automatic renewal clauses that were draining $1,200 a month combined. I found them, flagged them, and the owner nearly cried when she saw the number. The real estate staging company signed 4 new clients in the first month after I built their contract and invoicing system because they stopped losing jobs to competitors who looked more professional on paper. Diane was thrilled. She referred 2 more clients. I hired a part-time assistant of my own. Meanwhile, in the family group chat, which I had not left because I had not wanted to make a statement by leaving, things were getting quieter on the Celeste events front. There were fewer posts. A couple of mentions of a difficult event season. One post from my mother saying Celeste was working through some challenges and the family should be supportive. Then a message from Celeste saying she was restructuring and looking for someone to help with operations. I did not respond to any of it. My father sent me a private message asking if I was doing okay. I said I was doing well. He said he was glad. He said he missed seeing me. I told him I would come by soon. He replied with a simple okay and a heart. Then, approximately 4 months after I left the business, I received a phone call from an unknown number. I almost did not answer. When I did, it was a man who introduced himself as Raymond, a business broker. He said he had been referred to me by Gerald the accountant. He said he was working with a potential buyer who was interested in acquiring Celeste events or forming a substantial partnership with the brand, and that during his due diligence process, he had encountered some questions about the operational systems and their provenance. He said he had spoken to Celeste, but that Celeste had been unclear on certain technical aspects of the accounting architecture, and Gerald had suggested that the person who actually understood the systems was someone named Nadia. I asked Raymond what specifically he needed to know. He said the potential buyer wanted to understand the value and transferability of the operational infrastructure, specifically whether it was proprietary, whether it had been developed internally, and whether there were any ownership questions around it. He said the deal being discussed was significant. He mentioned a number that made me sit very still. The acquisition discussion was around $320,000. I was quiet for a moment, then I asked Raymond if he could send me the specific technical questions in writing so I could review them and respond formally. He said, of course. He emailed them within the hour. I read them carefully. They were asking whether the accounting system, the contract templates, the invoicing framework, and the client management database had been developed by Celeste or by external consultants. And if by external consultants, whether there were agreements or documentation about ownership and licensing. I thought about this for a long time, not because I was confused about the facts. I was not confused at all. I thought about it because I wanted to be sure about what I was willing to say and what I was willing to do. I thought about my mother's laugh at the dinner table. I thought about Celeste saying my email was aggressive. I thought about the word transactional. I thought about 3 years of Sunday mornings and evenings and quiet hours that no one had counted but me. Then I opened my documentation folder. I drafted a response to Raymond. I said that I was the person who had developed the operational infrastructure he was describing. I said I had the original files with metadata, the email threads establishing the work relationship, and a full log of hours and contributions spanning 3 years. I said I had not been employed by Celeste Events in any formal capacity, had received no compensation, and had not signed any work-for-hire agreement assigning ownership of my work to the business. I said that under standard intellectual property principles, absent a work-for-hire agreement or IP assignment clause, the tools I had built remained my intellectual property. I said I was not making any demands and I was not seeking to block the sale, but that the buyer should be clearly informed about the provenance of these systems, and that any acquisition should include clarity about licensing or replacement of those tools. I attached 13 documents to the email: original files with metadata, email threads, the accounting software administrator logs, 2 contracts with my name in the document properties, and one final thing I had almost forgotten about until I went through the folder: a thank you card. A physical card that Celeste had given me at the end of year 2, a small printed card that said thank you for everything you have built for us. I honestly do not know what this business would look like without your systems. I had kept it because that was the kind of person I was. I had photographed it and the photograph was in the folder. I attached the photograph. I sent the email, then I called Diane because Diane knew the industry and I wanted a second opinion before things moved further. Diane listened to the whole situation. When I finished, she said, Nadia, you have just fundamentally altered the terms of a $300,000 deal. I said I was not trying to blow up the deal. I said I was just being accurate. Diane said, I know, that is exactly why what you did matters. Celeste called me that evening. The call started very differently than any call we had ever had before. Her voice was low and tight and she asked me what I had sent to Raymond. I told her exactly what I had sent and why. There was a long pause, then she said, do you realize what this could do to the sale? I said yes. I said I had thought about that. She said, Nadia, you are going to cost me everything. I said, Celeste, I built a significant portion of what they are buying. She said that she had always planned to give me credit. She said things had just moved fast and she had not had a chance. I said 3 years was a long time to not have a chance. She said she had never meant for it to be this way. I said I believed her, but I also said that intentions do not change documentation. I told her I had no interest in destroying the deal. I told her what I actually wanted was simple. I want DIA formal consulting credit in any sale documents that describe the operational development of the business. I wanted a small percentage of the sale price, a number I named, which was modest given the circumstances, and I wanted a written acknowledgement from her, private, not public, that the systems I had built were mine and had been contributed to the business without compensation. I said if those 3 things could be done cleanly, I would confirm to Raymond that there were no ownership disputes and the process could continue. She said she needed to think. I said that was fine. I said Raymond had given me a timeline and I would need to respond within the week. She said she understood. She ended the call without saying goodbye. The next 2 days were silent, then my mother called, and this time the call was very different from the last one. My mother's voice had a different quality to it, not soft, not quite, but careful. She said she had spoken to Celeste and she had spoken to Raymond and she had spent 2 days trying to understand what had happened. She said she had not understood. She said that you were so involved in the business. I said, Mom, I know you did not understand. That is part of what I have been trying to explain. She was quiet. Then she said, Celeste says you built the whole financial side. I said, yes. She said, for 3 years. I said, yes. She said, and you were never paid. I said, no. The silence that followed lasted a long time, longer than any silence in a phone conversation I had ever had with my mother, and then she said something I had not expected. She said, why did you not just tell me? Her voice was not angry, it was something else, something closer to tired or maybe smaller than that. I said, Mom, I tried. She said she did not remember me trying. I said I knew. I said that was part of the problem. I did not say everything I could have said. I did not bring up the laundry room when I was 17. I did not bring up the office with the flyers. I did not bring up the dinner table laugh. I was not ready to open all of those doors in one call, and some part of me also knew that this phone call was already doing something important. My mother was not defending herself the way she usually did. She was just listening. And listening was not something she had always been willing to do when it came to me. She said she was sorry. She said it in a way that sounded like she was still figuring out the full shape of what she was apologizing for. But she said it. I said thank you. I said I was going to work through the business situation in a way that was fair and I was not trying to hurt anyone. She said she knew. She said she hoped Celeste would do the right thing. That surprised me too. I said I hoped so as well. Celeste came back to me on the 5th day with a counter-proposal. She agreed to the consulting credit, she agreed to the written acknowledgement. She pushed back on the percentage, offering half of what I had named. I sat with that for a day, then I went back to her with a number between my original ask and her counter. She agreed. We put it in writing through her broker, and Raymond confirmed the documentation satisfied the buyer's due diligence questions. The deal moved forward. I want to be clear about what happened next because this is the part that people sometimes misunderstand. The acknowledgement I received was not public. There was no announcement in the family group chat. There was no celebration. There was no moment where my mother stood at a dinner table and corrected the story she had been telling for years. That did not happen. What happened was quieter than that and in its own way more real. The written acknowledgement from Celeste was 1 page. It was signed and dated. It said clearly that I had developed the financial and operational infrastructure of Celeste events between certain years, that my contribution had been voluntary and uncompensated, that the systems I built remained my intellectual property, and that in the context of the business sale, a settlement had been made in recognition of my contribution. It was not poetry, it was a document. But it had her name at the bottom, it had a date, and it was mine. My business with Diane's clients continued to grow. Within 6 months, I had 7 active clients, my own registered LLC, a part-time bookkeeper, and a part-time admin assistant, and a rate that had increased twice. I was doing the same work I had always been doing, the careful, detailed, systematic work of keeping businesses financially healthy and operationally functional. The difference now was that people could see it and they were paying for it, and it had my name on it. Celeste's business was acquired by a regional events management group. She stayed on as creative director. The new operational team replaced the systems I had built with their own. That was fine. Those systems had served their purpose. I had long since moved on. My mother came to Roman 6. Sit me on a Saturday morning about 8 months after that dinner, the dinner where she had laughed. She came alone. She brought coffee from a bakery near my apartment, the kind I had always liked as a teenager. We sat at my small kitchen table and she looked around my apartment at the whiteboard on the wall with the client names and project timelines, at the stacked folders and the second monitor and the small framed print above my desk that said, do the work, keep the record. She looked at all of it quietly, and then she said, you built all of this? I said yes. She said, you have been building things for a long time? I said yes. She said, I should have seen it sooner. I did not argue with her. I said I was glad she could see it now. We talked for 2 hours that morning. Not about everything, not about all the years and all the moments and all the ways the story had been told without me in it. We talked about small things, about a neighbor she had seen, about my father's health, about a recipe she had been trying to perfect. But at the end, when she stood up to leave and she pulled on her coat, she stopped at the door and she turned around and she said, I am proud of you, Nadia. And her voice when she said it had a quality it had never had before when she spoke to me. It was not performance. It was not the voice she used for the group chat or for Patricia or for church. It was just her voice, quiet and plain and true, saying the thing she should have said 100 times before and was finally saying now. I said thank you, Mom. She nodded, she left. I stood in my kitchen for a moment after she was gone and I looked at the whiteboard and the folders and the second monitor, and I felt the same stillness I had felt so many times before. But this time it was not the stillness of holding something in. It was the stillness of having somewhere solid to stand. I want to say something to everyone who has been listening to this. I did not win by being loud. I did not win by making my family pay for what they missed. I did not win by burning anything down. I won by doing the one thing no one expected me to do for 3 years. I kept the records. I built the documentation. I did the work so thoroughly and so honestly that when the moment came, the truth was simply there, clean and clear, available to be seen by anyone who looked closely enough. You cannot argue with a metadata timestamp. You cannot talk your way around a signed contract. You cannot rewrite a 3-year log of work with a dinner table story. If you have been the quiet one in your family, the one who works while someone else gets the credit, the one whose contribution is invisible because you never demanded a spotlight, I want you to hear this clearly. The work is the proof, document everything, not out of bitterness. Not because you are planning a fight, but because the work you do is real, it belongs to you, and it deserves to exist in a form that the world can see. You are not invisible, you may just be undocumented. And those are two very different things. My name is Nadia. I am 31 years old. I track numbers, I build systems, and I know exactly where the money goes. I know what was built by whom and when. I know the full story, not just the version that got told at the dinner table. And now, finally, so does everyone else who needed to know. If this story reminded you of something you have lived through, or someone you know, or a version of yourself that stayed quiet for too long, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me this. What was the moment you realized the story being told about you was not the true one? What did you do about it? Or if you're still in the middle of it right now, what is holding you back from speaking? This channel exists for the people who do the work and keep the record. Nadia's story is not finished. And neither is yours.